I've been an English professor and Shakespeare scholar for over 30 years. I've had a wonderful career. And when I meet new people and they find out what I do, I get one of two reactions. The first reaction goes like this. Did Shakespeare really write all those plays? Or was it someone else? I love this reaction. You want to talk about Shakespeare's authorship, his theater, his life, his times, the printing errors in the first editions of his plays? Buckle up. It's going to be a long night. The second reaction I get goes like this. Shakespeare did not write those plays. It was fill in the blank. It was the Earl of Oxford. It was Christopher Marlowe. It was Sir Walter Raleigh. It was Sir Francis Drake. It was Queen Elizabeth I, Elvis Presley. Did you know that the late ruler of Libya, Muammar Gaddafi, believed that Shakespeare was an Arab named Shakespeare? I hate this reaction. Why? Because it's a conspiracy theory. It presupposes that Shakespeare's fellow actors, collaborators, business partners, as well as theater managers, printers, admirers, and friends, all colluded to hide the true identity of the author of Shakespeare's works. And that academics like myself continue this conspiracy to this very day. I occasionally get angry emails, sometimes laced with obscenities, from proponents of different authors, accusing me of ignoring their airtight evidence and continuing the cover-up. Why would I do this? Obviously, for the vast international power it gives me. I do not engage with these conversations because conspiracy theories are tautological. They are circular. Any evidence that I would offer of Shakespeare's authorship is dismissed by the theorist as part of the conspiracy. Those documents, those legal records, manufactured, a smokescreen, part of the cover-up. And when I ask them for their documentary evidence, they reply, well, they don't have documents. Clearly they've been suppressed, destroyed. That's part of the conspiracy. So you see, the absence of proof is proof of the conspiracy. This has led me to think more broadly about conspiracy theories, and so last semester I offered a course in conspiracy literature. What did I learn? Many conspiracy theories are the result of a failure of imagination. Now, I know that sounds counterintuitive because so many conspiracy theories are wild flights of fancy. Bill Gates is injecting microscopic robots into our bloodstreams. Traffic roundabouts cause tornadoes. Taylor Swift is an alien shape-shifting reptile. What I mean is that conspiracy theories seem imaginatively blinkered. They seem incapable of or willfully refusing to imagine any reality that does not accord with their experiences, preconceptions, values, or biases. Instead, they create fictions to support, to enforce those experiences, preconceptions, values, and biases. And I would say that's not true imagination. That is self-justification. It is a form of narcissism. My truth is the only truth, so I will create a fiction that shapes reality around my truth. And if you don't believe my fiction, then clearly you are part of a conspiracy to suppress the truth. Let's take a couple of very, very basic examples. This planet, Earth, seems, as we walk around every day, to be flat. Spoiler alert, it isn't. It is a sphere spinning and hurtling through space. But there are actually people out there who are seriously arguing that the Earth is flat, because that's how they experience it day to day. This leads them to conspiracy theory, because in order to hang on to that bizarre fiction, they have to believe that astronauts, plane pilots, ship captains, the 71 different space agencies around the world are all conspiring to hide the truth. Let's call that a failure of scientific imagination. There are politicians who we could name, and their followers who don't believe it when they lose an election. Why not? Everyone they know voted the same way as they did. And they honestly can't imagine that a majority of people out there have different values, different preferences, different priorities, different experiences. So when they lose, they cry conspiracy. That is a failure of social imagination, of empathetic imagination. And that's the saddest failure of all, because it cuts us off from other people. It cuts us off from other cultures. It cuts us off from history itself. And something like that actually happened to Shakespeare. You see, in the 19th century, the Victorian period, Shakespeare was at the peak of his popularity. He was held up as a universal genius, which meant British genius, and he was exported around the world to spread his universal values, which were curiously aligned with British values. How popular was he? In 1849, fans of rival actors, both playing the role of Macbeth at different theaters in New York City, got into a fight with each other. It turned into a riot, and at the end of the night, 31 people were dead over their interpretation of Shakespeare. Now, Shakespeare was held up to be the spectacular author, but he did not measure up to the Victorian notion of authorship. You see, since the 18th century, since the Romantic period, authors were assumed to be solitary geniuses, scribbling away in their garrets, channeling the gods of creativity to create perfect, immutable, timeless works of art, not for money, but for their own sake. And it was believed they informed those works of art with their exciting bohemian lives, what they had accomplished, what they thought, what they did. This idea was so prevalent that there were some people who could not imagine another model of authorship. They could not imagine that an author might be a middle-class country boy who wrote in order to make money, who collaborated with other writers, who occasionally rewrote his works. And since Shakespeare did not fit their model of authorship, they went looking for other authors. They wanted someone who was educated, traveled, glamorous, preferably noble. And they found a bunch of candidates. Their proof were parallels between the events in the candidates' lives and events in Shakespeare's plays. So, for example, in Shakespeare's play, The Tragedy of King Lear, the king has 3 daughters. The Earl of Oxford had 3 daughters. Case closed. Now, we shouldn't be too hard on the 19th century. It is easy to accidentally, to unthinkingly impose our own values on another historical period, on another culture, on another person. My students do this all the time. Whenever I tell them of the sometimes bizarre beliefs of people who lived 500 years ago, inevitably I'll have a student say, well, if I'd lived then, I wouldn't have believed that. That's silly. And I always say, in the whole class, you're the one person who would. Because if you can't imagine holding a different belief than the one you have in this historical moment, had you lived in another historical moment, you would not have been able to imagine a belief outside of it. So what do we do to overcome this problem, this accident? How do we increase our empathy? How do we stretch our imaginations to accommodate reality without creating self-serving fictions? I think there are a lot of ways. I do it through Shakespeare. I've been doing it through Shakespeare for so long that my friends are worried about me. They will say, Paul, you've been reading the same author for 30 years. Aren't you bored? I could lend you a Stephen King novel. And I would say, no, I'm actually honestly not bored, because every time I read Shakespeare, I find something new in the plays. But most of all, I am amazed at Shakespeare's imagination. Just think about his characters. He created hundreds of characters, kings and beggars, lovers and villains, heroes, the poor, the rich, the insane, the brilliant, old and young, characters from his own historical period and from 1,000 years before. And he gave all of those characters distinct, compelling voices. He let each of those characters have their own truth. And that means that Shakespeare held those voices and those disparate truths all in his imagination. Perhaps we should conspire to be a bit more like Shakespeare. Thank you.